I write about a lot of like general pop culture stuff, but I literally got my job because I knew an absurd amount of information about A Song of Ice and Fire and the show, and so now that's kind of like my bread and butter, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys.
I am Lauren. I'm also known as Fat Pink Mast on Twitter.
If you aren't following her now, you should.
Yeah, feel free. We live tweet the shows, and yeah, that's me.
I am Roars from the channel Roars. I do videos on history of A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. I do reviews of the episodes, theories, news, basically anything. I'm a sucker for everything A Song of Ice and Fire.
As we all are. Since
Yeah.
Came to Nashville for this.
Exactly.
I love being here. Cool. Well, I think, obviously, I think if you showed up to this panel, you probably know what R+L stands for, but I kind of figured we should run through why this is such a big deal and the theories surrounding it.
Really quick before we go, because I always like to ask a question.
Yep.
For raise of hands first, who thinks that Rhaegar and Lyanna, it wasn't a kidnapping, it was because of love? Raise your hand. Woo! Wow! Whoa! Okay, minority here, I'm sorry. How many of you think he's an evil rapist and he took that girl and raped her to death? Whoa! This is an easy crowd. Third option.
I think he took her because that's what modeling do. They steal their women. And everything was Northern related. I think he knows that.
But, wait, what?
And once a woman in the North, he steals her.
But he wasn't from the North.
No, but he did a lot of things in the Northern faction when it came to Lyanna.
Oh, here's a third option. Or how many think that he took her because he was obsessed with a prophecy and realized, okay, that's a little bit more, yeah. The evil rapist maybe was a little too far, I apologize.
There's a little more like nuances of like Stockholm.
Yeah.
Things like potentially peppered in there.
I get that on my channel all the time. I made an R+L, like, why did Rhaegar some comments on there. He's a rapist, how could you think otherwise? I'm like, I'm so sorry. But you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why people are so obsessed with this, and the reason why I kind of like pour over discussions and talk to people about it all the time, is because we have so little information about what happened, and therefore like people kind of fill in the blanks with what they are projecting onto this character based on all secondhand stories. Like we only know things about Rhaegar from people that spend time, like Barristan talks very highly of him, and
a lot of people do. I mean,
you made a really good point on your video that's on your channel that I had never thought of before, which is that like,
is it about Ned?
No, about how like when like murderers or like people like kind of like snap, and then all that you hear about them is like, oh, that was so unexpected, that was so out of character.
Yeah, that's a common thing in our world. Serial killers. But he was such a great guy. I loved him so much. He was so cool. So that could be Rhaegar, you know? Because even Ned, this is what even gets me, and I think we should start at the beginning of what it is. You're right, we derailed that a little bit. I'll talk about Ned at that. So do you want to give us a general overview of Rhaegar and what happened, starting at perhaps the tourney of Harrenhal, or maybe him being obsessed with the prophecy and how that led to...
Yeah, and you guys can feel free to jump in.
No, it's all you, baby. It's all you.
So what we know, mainly from stories that were told in the book series, there's a really big one that's told. It's Mira and Jojen are speaking with Bran while they're traveling, and they are like, oh, you've never heard the story of the Night of the Laughing Tree? And he's like, no. And it's interesting because they consistently keep being like, your father never told you this story, which means that there's something very important going on. So they tell the story of a young Crannog man who is the Reed family, and it's very heavily implied that it's Howland. Howland Reed is the Crannog man who decided to travel south, spends a little bit of time on the Isle of Faces, and then winds up at Harrenhal, and there's a big tournament happening, and this is obviously the big tourney of Harrenhal, where I love Alt-Shift-X is another really great Yeah. He has a really great explainer of this, and he kind of basically describes it as like the ultimate high school party. Everyone was there, everyone got drunk, people hooked up, it was just this
How can you not love Alt-Shift-X?
Yeah.
Seriously, you
just it's great. But yeah, so it's kind of like everybody was there. Like Ned, his older brother, And
Benjen was there, yeah,
everyone.
everyone was there. Robert, we had.
Like in the story, Mira makes a point that like Tywin Lannister was not there. He says that like the Lion was like upset and he wasn't there, but it's like young Jaime, all of these people who are kind of like in their prime that you've heard about now, all of these times. We're at this big tournament, and Howland Reed shows up, and there's sort of this like history of conflict between the Crannogmen and other people of Westeros. They're built a little bit smaller, and people just don't like them for whatever terrible
They look
reason.
different, so they're ostracized. I mean, that's pretty common.
Yeah, exactly. And so Howland gets kind of like set upon by these 3 squires who beat him up basically, and a she-wolf appears and kind of like rescues him, and it's very heavily implied that this is Lyanna. And so she saves him, brings him back to her tent, and they hang out. And they convince him to like stick around, enjoy the tournament as much as he can, and they go to dinner that night, a big feast at Harrenhal. And Howland had like made a point to remember the faces of the men who attacked him, and so he spots them sitting next to the different knights that they squire for, and with the help of like all of basically the Stark kids, they kind of convince Howland, they're like, oh, like you should like enter the tourney and kind of like get back at them for attacking you. And he's like, oh, I don't really know, like I don't think I want to do that. I have no experience jousting. Like, he's really like not totally certain about it. And also slipped into that story, you hear that like the Dragon Prince, who is Rhaegar Targaryen, sang a song because he's very known for like playing the harp and singing a song. He's a dreamy Targaryen. And it's noted that the she-wolf, Lyanna, like wept because she was so moved by this song. And that's sort of our understanding of the first encounter between them, or like that's the first time that they're sort of ever linked in the book series. And so, yeah, so what happens is everyone kind of like goes to bed. They wake up the next day, like the tourney recommences, and at some point a mysterious knight shows up who's completely covered. There's no like distinguishing features other than the fact that like they seem a little bit smaller, and their armor is sort of pieced together and ill-fitting.
They have a booming voice, and
Yeah, and they have a shield that's it's the laughing tree. And so in the story, the way that Mira's telling it, and Bran even says like, oh well, like that must have been the Crannogman, like that must have been Howland. And I think it's what people think, and I kind of agree with this, is that that's sort of a misdirection, and it's really Lyanna who is the Knight of the Laughing
And the first counter you hear to that, and I've heard this over and over again on my Mystery Night video, how could she, being the size of an adolescent girl, beat these men? And George has done interviews where he said it's not about your size and your strength with jousting, it's about how well you ride your horse. And he is very clear to say that girl was a half horse.
Yeah.
So
they even incorporated that into the show in like the one flashback that we have of
she's riding a horse. Yeah, they're just driving that home.
Yeah. So generally people, well, and we can get into this later, but the consensus is usually the assumption that the Knight of the Laughing Tree was Lyanna Stark, and she, or whoever it was, beats all of those knights, and a lot of people are kind of like upset about that. Yeah.
Ares loses his shit and thinks, that person's against me, and then Rhaegar goes, sends people, and he discovers her. And the thought is that he discovered her with the armor and was so moved by it that they kind of started doing their thing.
Right, because like you can fill in the blanks and see like, oh, like this Dragon Prince is sent to find this mystery knight. He shows up, he's like, oh my god, it's you, like the she-wolf. Like he's very like enamored with her, very impressed with the fact that she had just won, like basically bested all of these knights. And then she's like, oh, like you're Rhaegar. Like I saw you sing that song last night, and it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
So like, if you want to go that way, it's really easy to kind of like fill in the blanks in the story that we don't totally know all the details about, and assume that their relationship started at this tournament.
Well, and you hear constantly people go, well, that was so reckless and that's so dumb, and she was strong-willed. But one, she's a teenager.
Right.
Teenagers. We've all been there, all of us. We do some dumb
It's like
things.
the hot prince.
The hot prince, who probably, this guy's obsessed with a prophecy. If a hot prince that makes you weep, he has all these skills, he comes to you and he goes, baby, I need you to fulfill this prophecy. You're the one, are you gonna say no? Even the dudes are nodding, they're like, yeah, oh yeah. I would give everything to Rhaegar, you're done, yeah. It's understandable, I would too.
Yeah.
I'd be throwing my panties at him, like,
Well,
we don't need to get married, we can do it now.
she was known, right? I mean, I think she was kind kind of known for being like sort of off the cuff and
The wild wolf, yeah. She had
that's
that
right.
wolf's
I mean,
blood.
she's not Ned.
Yeah.
She's not gonna do her duty. I mean, she does what she wants.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ned is described in the story of the attorney as like the quiet wolf.
Yep,
Like, he's
exactly.
very, like,
Yep.
oh Ned, I know. But yeah, so I think it's really interesting that is usually the starting point for a lot of people when they try and talk about their relationship, because then after that, all that we really know is that a lot of people in the realm think that Rhaegar kidnapped her, but we don't really know any details about how they, like when they disappeared, like where they were near Harrenhal again.
Yeah. Why was it planned to meet up there? Because that's really suspicious. Oh,
Right.
you two just met and he abducted you. Yeah.
Right. And then I've also seen one theory, which I think you might have gone into also in your great video breakdown, which is that like he might have been rescuing her in some way. Like if there were other people who had found out that she was the Knight of the Laughing Tree and were trying to kind of like get back at her.
He
might
knew the Mad King wanted her dead.
Yeah, he might
Yep.
have sort of like swooped in to save her, and then that's again like one more layer on how their relationship sort of keeps building. And so there are all these layers that we just don't know, but everyone's dying to know, because obviously their relationship is the starting point for so many important things. It's Robert's rebellion, it's Jon's birth, at least like in the show it's been.
So I want to ask, and because you're so quiet down there, I want to ask you this question, because I get it asked a lot.
Yeah.
So if Lyanna was so upset at Robert for cheating, and she just, you can't love is sweet, Ned, but the nature of a man doesn't change, why then would she be okay with sleeping with a married man? What are your thoughts on that? Does that go against what she was complaining about to Ned?
I mean, maybe it's not, maybe what's good for the goose isn't what's good for the gander. I mean, maybe if she's spurned by Robert, that's different than when she's making that choice. But the other thing that I've always sort of thought about and wondered is, I know they talk about at the tourney when Rhaegar gives Lyanna the rose, that Elia is upset, but we don't necessarily know that that's true. And if Elia, well, and so that's one thing that I sort of question, Lyanna being the Laughing Knight, so does she like run back and take all her armor off and put on a dress and then run back up to receive this rose, like, or is this two separate occurrences?
I think it was the next day.
Okay. Yeah, it was at the end, the Queen of Beauty.
You know, maybe Elia acts like she's upset, or maybe she really is, but if Rhaegar is convinced that the prophecy requires this, then there's nothing to say that Elia is not also convinced that it has to happen.
And we see through the visions with Dany that he talks with her about it. He's very open with his, I need the third head of the dragon. I need...
So Dany has the vision of Rhaegar holding young baby Aegon with Elia there, and he says like his is the song of ice and fire, the dragon needs 3 heads, like he's the prince that was...
And knowing Elia...
It's changed a little bit, I think, in the show. They changed it from the books. But another interesting thing is Dorne is so sexually liberal.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean I'm okay with my husband cheating, but they have paramours. They're okay with homosexual relationships. They don't care. You do whatever. Love's love. Let's do this. So that she might have been in a more relaxed place growing up, she might have been like, okay, maybe I'm not exactly okay with this, but I understand because this is so important to you. Or she could have been okay with it.
There's also the Dornish. I've seen people talk about
the Dornish. They're very lax on sexuality and having paramours, mistresses, everything, you know.
I think that combined with then, I've also seen people say that like there were rumors, or maybe this is just a flat out theory, that Elia couldn't have any kids after Aegon.
Because she was so, she was so fragile, it would kill her to have another one.
And so if Elia was totally on board with the prophecy that Rhaegar was so obsessed with and knew that she couldn't provide him that third child that was so important, maybe that's just like one more reason why she was like, all right, like if you're really into this Lyanna chick who sounds cool.
Yeah.
Well, and she was at that tourney, and not knowing anything, I don't think we can discount the fact that Rhaegar went and discovered that Lyanna was the Laughing Knight, went back to his tent and was like, this chick is really awesome. And Elia was like, you know what? Maybe she's the one. I mean, how do we know that they don't discuss it together? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that, the idea that Elia had that agency and played a part, and that Rhaegar wasn't just like doing whatever he wanted.
Right.
You want to know what I think is the most solid evidence? Talking about it to me, that just, and then this could just be me, that Rhaegar didn't kidnap and rape her against her will, is if you go and read the point of view chapters from Ned, Ned never has a nasty thing to say about Rhaegar. Not a single thing. And if someone took your sister and raped her to death, and you held her in your arms while she died, you're gonna have some nasty thoughts. You're gonna be right along with Robert. Yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck his sister. Sorry. Right. So, I mean, Ned even compares Rhaegar to Robert and thinks more positive about Rhaegar. Like, it's just, to me, if someone did that to your sister, raped her to death and held her against her, you're not going to say positive things regardless of how many years have gone by. You're going to be pissed.
Right. Yeah,
So, to me,
that's a really important point.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things to me that makes me believe Ned knew what was going on, that they had arranged this.
I mean, and I think Ned's probably the only one, because if I remember correctly, Benjen was, well, yes, definitely Howland. But Benjen seemed still pretty bitter about it.
Yeah.
And because I think there comes a time, I mean, I think there are theories out there that Benjen does know about Jon's parentage.
Well, yeah, and I think this was in the books too. He has that line to Jon where he's like, "Don't rush into sign, like to swearing a Night's Watch oath, like you." And then Jon says, like, "I don't care that I can't have children," and Benjen says, "You would if you knew what it meant." And it, like, there's a way to read into that, which is like just like generally like, "Hey, dude, like you're young, you don't know what it means to be a father yet." And then like largely, if Benjen does know, he might be being like, "Well, if you're the promised prince of the realm, you might want to like
Hold on a little bit.
leave some options open." But
One of my favorite theories is that motivated Benjen to join the Night's Watch. Because if you're thinking they just lost some major Stark men, you got Ned left. What if something happens to Ned? This is a new ruler, monarchy taking over. A dynasty was just destroyed. Why join the Night's Watch? You need Stark males there, even for alliances and stuff like that. But he goes to the wall. So part of me thinks that he knew, or maybe he helped Lyanna meet up or something, and the guilt of it, or maybe Ned told him. And oh God, you're covered in blood and everything, Lyanna. Really? Oh, you know, my other thought besides that is Benjen wasn't okay with him not knowing, and Ned basically said, "I'm the Lord of Winterfell. I'm in control of the North. If you don't like it, then that's your problem." And Benjen was like, "Fine, I'm done," and he went to the wall. So there's a lot of theories that kind of mesh into why Benjen left, because it's very odd. It is odd that he went to the wall. That, you know, people go, "Well, that's the second Stark, like Starks traditionally go there," and it's like, well, it was still odd timing to go right away.
my big question that still drives me nuts is that, like, if Howland was not only there when like this started, but then was also at the Tower of Joy, and then we can assume that he knows the extent to whatever Ned found out when he was there, which is that like Lyanna had this baby and that it's Jon and that Ned's gonna pretend like it's his bastard. Where is Howland? Why has he been he's sent his kids to meet up with Bran, but he's just like staying in the shadows, and I'm just like, it's killing me that he hasn't like come forward yet and chosen to like find Jon or say anything to anybody. And I hope that he will. I hope that that is how Jon finds out who his parents is. I'm really wishing that it comes from Howland.
It's because he's the High Septon.
You want to take that
corner?
You want to take that a different. I just heard a new theory yesterday that Jojen is actually Howland Reed. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop! There's a whole. They're like, well, they're short and they look like children, and you know he could pass up as a child. I'm like, there's wrinkles. No matter how childlike you look, you get to a certain age and you're not escaping this.
He's dead, or like paste.
Jojen.
Yeah, you
Well,
take that
I wonder if Howland has some like grayscale or something going on that, I mean.
This is just getting darker and darker. My God.
But like, you know, so what is his problem? What is he doing?
Right.
We want to talk about a young woman in a bed of blood. We don't want to be talking about.
Yeah. So that's one big question that I have.